Now I'm going to retroactively introduce Dorrit. Dorrit Carroll received her undergraduate and law degrees from Georgetown University. She recently won the Laura Lee Washburn Prize from Harper Review for her chapbook, A Meditation on Purgatory. So our program tonight will consist of 17 readers. It's a lot, but it's 4 minutes each, so time will fly. And poets will read in reverse alphabetical order and will introduce one another so we don't have downtime. And then each of the 3 organizers will read one very, very, very short poem apiece, and Luther will close it out. If you were here in person, we'd have tables with everyone's books and we'd be selling them. But if you're so inclined, if you go back to our Facebook page in the discussion area, you'll see with each presenter's name, there should be a link to some of their books. So now it is my privilege to introduce our first reader, Katherine Young. Katherine E. Young is a poet and translator from Russian. She's a human rights activist and the Poet Laureate Emerita of Arlington, Virginia.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm delighted to be here with everybody tonight. The first poem that I'm going to read is set in Moscow on the Ring Road on the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which of course was liberated by Soviet troops. Wreaths. While wreaths are laid and speeches made, and politicians arrange to be seen amid shrieking lights at the wall of death, a man staggers out through 7 lanes of traffic to the center of the road, dead center. And if he stretches out his hands, his fingers will touch the chrome and magic before being torn off. Some secret grief makes him fall to his knees, swaying gently, gently. But who has a soul so great it holds all the world within? Behind their windows, drivers stare and honk at him. I press my palm to the glass of the tram before moving on. Hush, unbuttoned sunset. Hush, unbuttoned sunset. Let soft breeze skim your skin. On sidewalks, people sigh, shake loose the day's last stone from shoes that rub heels fine. Buses abandon asphalt to doze in Antipodean lots amid nimbi of razor wire. Hush, unbuttoned sunset. Unloose the coils of day. Appointments at a quick step, headlines, deadlines, red lights, hand-lettered signs aligned in highway islands amid the sea of vehicles, veteran, homeless, hungry. Hush, unbuttoned sunset, fold back the flaps of evening, examine your ineffectual hands scrolling through the pages of mute, anonymous faces, a man on hunger strike, a child warehoused in a cage in a repurposed Walmart, adrift in the digital night. Hush, unbuttoned sunset. Dismiss your fear of the dark. In all the centuries of our unlearning, we've saved only ourselves, and that only by the grace of the God of small favors. And as twilight falls on the terrace and ice melts in your glass and your son comes for a kiss to be wrapped in your arms and carried to his air-conditioned room, you who believe in so little must still believe in evening enough to carry on. And the final poem I'm going to read tonight is taken from the chronicle describing the sack of the city of Novgorod in 1570 by Ivan the Terrible's troops, but its title is contemporary, Your City's Name Here. And so the authorities command women and children of all ages to be brought to the nearest bridge and cast down from the tallest tower to the river beneath. where soldiers cruise in boats, pitchforks, lances, axes at the ready. And whenever a woman rises to the water's surface, she's seized with giant iron hooks, hacked at with axes, her body plunged down to the depths without mercy. Listen, above the screams, you can hear men singing, someone's sons, their voices warm and golden as they go about their work. The melody thrums in ears, nose, throat, burns in lungs like breath held too long, trickles sticky down wrists and hands, your suddenly unstrung hands. Our next poet, Yirmiyahu Aaron Taub, www.yataub.net, is the author of Prodigal Children in the House of God, Stories, and 6 books of poetry.
Thank you, Katherine. Thank you, organizers. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to be part of this amazing event. I'm going to read 2 poems from my 3rd book of poetry, which is called Uncle Fagala. The first poem is called Jewish Spring. Winter birds brush our faces in farewell. Our step quickens as thaw gains force and marches into inevitability. Flowers, bold in their delicacy, viewed since time's beginning, are seen anew, interpreted afresh. Everyone sees flowers in a different way, Rena once said. Trees spread cover thickly between the chemical groves below and above, insisting on their leafy say. Hands pool the earth, laying the foundation for renewal. Already we envision stalks bent with bounty. We breathe these many fragrances, humbled, awed. But like the gazelle on the savannah, our eyes are always shielded toward the horizon. We peruse the headlines and the top stories. We assess the pitch of the chatter. Who knows how long this generosity, how deep this permissibility? Dogwood blossoms etch our prayer in grace. And this next poem is called Silence Equals Life, and it's a play on the ACT UP slogan, Silence Equals Death. And ACT UP is the AIDS activist group, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. Silence equals life. The epithets were squashed, the chat rooms were silent, salons were now the order of the day. The paraphernalia were displayed only in museum halls. The tones on the wall placards reflected a curiosity in the historical. All cautionary notes had been removed. The posters and pamphlets were relegated to rare book reading rooms. They were to be understood as emblems of a dusty Weltanschauung. Shaved heads were at last merely a fashion statement. The anthems once beerily chanted were refashioned for the cabaret, with sequins and panache. Boots marching on cobblestones at midnight inspired an unfamiliar sense of security. The brass was removed, the fists disassembled. Stunned, we unbolted our shutters and warily peered out. The winds in the town square had died down. The garbage fluttered no more. We were no longer despised. And now I will introduce our next reader, who is Katherine Smith. Katherine Smith has published 2 poetry books, Argument by Design, Washington Writers Publishing House, 2003, and Woman Alone on the Mountain, Iris Press, 2014. And now here's Katherine.
So much to Nancy, Dorrit, and Luther. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to read a poem called Shepherd. Shepherd. The neighborhood shines before dark like a child whose parents have properly taught her the limits of the world. The small beauty of whirring air conditioners, newspapers carefully gathered from driveways Sunday mornings, then refolded at dusk. The last sun on the white blankets of the Appaloosas grazing in the field. You hope you have taught your daughter enough about the temperature of grilled meat, about evenings too cool for bare skin, about what one human can be for another. Once you two lived, the only Jews for 50 miles, in a small town in Tennessee. You hope you taught her well enough how to read the book of the world and not be haunted by its strangeness. The swing set has almost vanished. On your evening walk, you dream that the night about to fall on the neighborhood has tangled in your daughter's hair. You wake to a sharp bark from the white muzzle of the shepherd that Young used to rush towards you, teeth snapping. Now her grizzled tail glints, wagging as she herds you back to the friendly road. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce our next reader, and that is Myra Sklaruz. And Myra's books include From the Backyard of the Diaspora, which won a National Jewish Book Award and was published with Dryad Press. Her next book will come out or has come out in 2020 with SUNY Press. And the name of that book is A Survivor Named Trauma, Holocaust Memory in Lithuania. So, Myra.
Thank you. When he lay her down, when the bully lay her down upon the earth and brought his fists to bear upon her child's body, when he gathered her flailing wrists like the delicate bones of birds and pinned her down, did she exist in his eyes? When he uttered the dangerous words, Jew, Jew, she was not sure of her sin, for she had barely grown into her Jewish skin. She lay between a world she had newly come to love, a simple classroom, and a world she could not yet imagine, where years later she would resurrect her bully, grant him immortal status, his fist, the force of his anger, hunkered down on a thin sheet of paper. And poetry can alter reality. In Lithuania, beginning in 1941, close to 95% of the Jewish inhabitants were killed, mostly in their own villages, by Lithuanian activists and members of the German occupying forces. Members of my family came to their end that way. Some Jews hid in the huge haystacks in the villages. This poem, 1941, creates a brief hiatus for the victim. 1941, you decide to crawl out from the haystack where you're hiding to come up for air. Even the lowliest fish of the sea is allowed to pull the residue of air into its blood. For some, it is too late. The pitchfork of the farmer pushed in and in, but you scramble to the top of a chimney pot where two storks have made their immense nest. You can be seen in the flat landscape. You take no trouble to conceal yourself. This is before the farmer raises his rifle, before your expulsion from this world into the next. You warm yourself among the storks, profit among birds, your world ajar. You read the sun trying to go down, the moon with its hem caught on the horizon, for a moment in perfect stasis, high on your absurd perch, you are still breathing. It's my pleasure to introduce Matthew Silverman, author of The Floating Door and The Breath Before Birds Fly, and who has co-edited 3 Jewish anthologies, including with Naomi Carlson, 101 Jewish Poems for the Third Millennium. On behalf of all of us, I thank you both.
Thank you very much. Okay. The first poem I'm going to read is called The Poem I Never Wrote, and it has an epigraph that begins with, why do some of your poems have magical realism in them? What is so magical about them? Asked a student interviewing me. When I say magical realism, I mean a bullet. Pop, 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 pow, bang. Shaped like fish, small as bait. It travels faster than falcons fly, 220 miles per hour, the fastest creatures on Earth. What does that mean? Nothing living can flee faster than 1900 miles per hour. The gunman actually aimed at our rabbi. No different than a pastor, a priest, or a mom. No different than you. At 11:23 a.m. in Poway, at those speeds, it still kills. Except a woman stepped in the projected path. But not today. We go back in time, change what we know happened, grant ourselves this one miracle, unravel the threads, unwind the screams, rotate the bullet back into the gun's heart, silence the songs, move mouths to prayers, shuffle out of cushioned seats, and exit through the sanctuary, out the big double doors, out the temple, out to the car where the gun grows wings and morphs into a metal bird, eyes like 2 pieces of gelt with feathers swept back to curved pointed tips. Watch it hover out of reach above a hand filled with so much intent to do harm, left grasping for what once was there, until it lifts and flaps and shines like the Sargasso Sea and waves toward a sky that pulses gold. The next poem I'm going to read is a found poem on TripAdvisor's reviews, and it's called Number 10 of 479 Things to Do in DC. Thumbs down, 1 star. What a waste. What does the health department have to say about the shoes exhibit and the choking smell? A little Lysol, please. I came back home with an ugly cough and chest pain. Why do they make it so crowded? At least 6 deep, like being stuffed into a small car, and the heat so inhumane, like walking through a fictional textbook. Too much security and armed men in uniform who prod you along like overfed cattle. $18 for a soggy sandwich, cold soup, and a warm drink. Recommendation, eat before you go. Upon exiting, my son took a complete revolution through the circular doors, and a guard lectured him on his behavior. Where are the live reenactments? The Holocaust has many educational opportunities, so why not add a few buttons to push, some sensational scenes that come to life to get a real feel for time? Less reading would be nice. Where's the 1940s music? Where's the art? If Disney did this, we would get the profound message our generation needs. I expected so much more. Could people cover their cry face? Where are all the survivors? Should be more child-friendly. Too packed, I could smell their bad breath and gas. It's my pleasure to introduce the next reader that we will be having tonight. It's Kim Roberts, who is the editor of By Broad Potomac Shore, which is great poems from the early days of our nation's capital, and author of The Scientific Method, which I highly recommend. Y'all should definitely read. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be part of this group. I'm going to read 2 short poems about the Jewish High Holy Days. This first poem is called Milkweed at Rosh Hashanah, and I start with the Latin name for milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. This is the new year, the season when paisley-shaped pods turn from celadon to ash brown and split clamwise, releasing their silk. Each pod holds up to 100 seeds. Each seed has its ghostly, fragile panicle, large enough to contain hope, which spreads on a gust. I imagine the relief, the halving and shedding, as the prophet Micah instructs us to cast our sins into the depths of the sea. The open pods look like boats, thin-skinned dugouts sailing toward a shore replete with next year's monarch eggs. How those caterpillars love the bitter cardenalides, store them up in their flesh. Milkweed's Latin name honors Asclepios, Greek god of medicine. What is toxic to some is sustenance to others. And the second one is called Yom Kippur. The moon is always disappearing, waning a little more with each lunation. Each year, astronomers say it moves another 1.5 inches further away. The root of the word eclipse comes from the Greek for abandonment. What creature killed the rabbit overnight, cracked its chest wide and pulled out each organ, glistening in pink and blue membrane sacs? Who robs the treasure chest, then leaves the jewels behind? Now the first hard frost rents the ground and the maple leaves begin to turn. Teshuvah for our length of days. Split open my chest. I will steal 1 waning hour to add to the great storehouse of night. And our next reader is Linda Pastan. Linda Pastan was Poet Laureate of Maryland from 1991 to 1995. In 2003, she won the Ruth Lilly Prize for Lifetime Achievement. Her 15th book of poems is A Dog Runs Through It.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to read 3 poems. This is, It is Raining on the House of Anne Frank. It is raining on the house of Anne Frank and on the tourists herded together under the shadow of their umbrellas, on the perfectly silent tourists who would rather be somewhere else, but who wait here on stairs so steep they must rise to some occasion, high in the empty loft, in the quaint toilet, in the skeleton of a kitchen, or on the map, each of its arrows a barb of wire with all the dates, the expulsions, the forbidding shapes of continents. And across Amsterdam, it is raining on the Van Gogh Museum, where we will hurry next to see how someone else could find the pure center of light within the dark circle of his demons. And this is The Cossacks for Frances Smythe. For Jews, the Cossacks are always coming. Therefore, I think the sunspot on my arm is melanoma. Therefore, I celebrate New Year's Eve by counting my annual dead. My mother, when she was dying, spoke to her visitors of books and travel, displaying serenity as a form of manners, though I could tell the difference. But when I watched you planning for a life you knew you'd never have, I couldn't explain your genuine smile in the face of disaster. Was it denial laced with acceptance? Or was it generations of being English, Bronte's Lucian Villette living as if no fire raised beneath her dun-colored dress? I want to live the way you did, preparing for next year's famine with wine and music as if it were a 10-course banquet. But listen, Those are hoofbeats on the frosty autumn air. And this is what we are capable of on hearing of prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib. What we are capable of is always astonishing, though never quite a surprise. Astronomers find more evidence of dark matter, the newspaper says on the next page, a fact or metaphor. I think of those villagers in France who risked their only lives to save a handful of Jews, and I try to find from that fading chink of light an incandescent path through all these darknesses. And I'm happy to introduce my friend Jean Nordhaus. Jean's 7 volumes of poetry include Memos from the Broken World, My Life in Hiding, Innocence, and the Porcelain Apes of Moses Mendelssohn.
Thank you. Interfaith. We made our pact. We would celebrate all holidays, though we believed in none. The more the better, Santa Claus and Hanukkah gelt, Easter eggs and matzo balls, bonfires at the Pueblo on Christmas Eve, as the men in their blankets and the guards in their uniforms lifted the wobbly Virgin in her painted sukkah to their shoulders, dancing her around the plaza, guns going off, bonfires crackling, bullet casings scattered in the sand. It was all a panoply, a glorious jumble of old and new, a shopping spree. Why limit ourselves to one God, one tribe, when we could have them all? We believed in life, in celebration, the bottle of champagne tucked on its side in the fridge in case. Now that you're beyond all revelry, I've joined the synagogue of skeptics, where I belong, where I'm at last at home. Ecumenical. I've put the menorah back on the mantle, my ecumenical mantle, next to the Buddha hand, tenderly warding off fear, next to the Mani stone, promising transport, the rippling snake god with turquoise eyes, and the tin Spanish church with its 2 fat crosses. Side by side in the sun on the slate ledge above the blackened fireplace, above the fine white ashes of yesterday's coals, they sit, collegial and calm in the drowse of afternoon, oblivious to the fires they have kindled, the flames they've fed, the conflagrations. To either side, the tools are ranged, the poker, shovel, rake, the grill, the tongs. And my last poem is The Innocent. Alone and together, we stand on the platform, a mob of strangers awaiting a train. There may be among us a wife beater, surely a thief. That man in the blue dolphin tie, the frazzled mother gathering in her scattered girls, each of us caught in the swill of our being, none of us blameless, not one of us pure. Greedy, covetous, selfish, vain, we have trafficked in lies, we have practiced small cruelties. Even the baby asleep in a sling on his mother's breast has been willful, has shaken with rage. Yet, should fate arrive as a wind, in a bullet, a bomb, at the instant of shock, in the silent heart of conflagration, we will all be transformed into innocence, cleansed in the fires of violence, not for any sins committed, but for standing where we stand, together in the soft, the vulnerable flesh. It's a pleasure to introduce the next reader, Yvette Neisser. She's the author of Grip, winner of the 2011 Jival Press Poetry Award, a Spanish poetry translator, and co-director of the DC Area Literary Translators Network.
Thank you so much, Jean. Before I begin, I just want to mention that the word Achtung in German means attention, and it's what Nazi guards used to shout upon entering a barracks in a concentration camp. Revisionist history. In a world without Hitler, the synagogues could still be standing, still filling with worshipers on Shabbat mornings. My grandfather could have stayed in Germany. The great house in Frankfurt could still belong to our family. My father could have grown up there, sliding down the wooden banisters, listening to piano symphonies float up from the music room. Gas chambers never invented. Dachau, a nice place to visit. My aunt's first word, not Achtung. After the war, not the line demarking the moment when my grandmother refused to speak German. I could have read Rilke in the original. People would be able to spell my names. And this next poem I wrote at the beginning of the Syrian civil war. It mentions Bashar al-Assad, who is the president of Syria. Nonfiction. 1. I didn't want this poem. No one wanted a poem like this. From my grandmother came down a legacy, the words concentration camp, the word Holocaust. And every piece of history, every Achtung, every aria sung in a barrack, rising into the night to slake her parched dreams, every call of never again became mine, a coat of arms I have carried all my life. Have I borne it well? Should I wield it or hide behind it? 2. March 2012, Homs, Syria. The headline reads, "Women and children stabbed, burned to death." 3. In the president's quarters, Bashar al-Assad just wants a cup of coffee. It's not easy, you know, clamping the lid on the revolution. You have to keep pressing it down until the women shut up and the babies stop crying, until no one survives but you, and you step outside to walk among the remains. A landscape barren of flower, smoke still brimming from the angry bones. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Olga Livshin. She is the author of A Life Replaced, Poems and Translations from Anna Akhmatova and Vladimir Gandelsman, published in 2019.
Thank you. Translating a Life for OM and MR. Someone spread a blanket of wild buckwheat over a meadow. Someone tucked puffball pillows in each corner of the purple-green sheet. It is summer everywhere except war. War where it used to be home, and now war by government here. And what does it matter that the meadow seduces the bees in pollen, or me in lines of a poem, or that I hear perfectly good Russian names for plants and translate them into you and me-ish? Take the tea mushroom, the little fox mushrooms and piggies, the early field dweller, the mysterious cheese eater. These words are undocumented here, and the country that sent them erases every syllable with its crimes. Take an under birch mushroom. Anyway, it's a choice edible. Birch bolete, in your tongue, on the tongue, the language for falling in love with forests and stories and friends does not care who's killing whom. Unfortunately, I care. And sitting here by a huge flowering bush, I see no refuge. What languaged fantasy could stop us from being murderous strangers? Would you take a Russian mushroom name, tuck it in your lapel for the brief banquet of life? Does that translate anything else for you? Is this how it works? Eating a persimmon, 1954. At 4 years old, in her grandpa's lap, sun-warmed inside an Odessa courtyard, my mother tests out a persimmon. She has never met such weird fruit, sweet jellyfish, creepy crawling. No es, little Maidele. Eat, her grandpa glows at her, a Jewish wizard visiting from a collective farm. His beard smells like cow poop. In quiet Russian, she asks, Grandpa, do people actually like persimmons? Oh, Mansi, silly stories. He brushes her off. Is this why I walked all over the Privoz market for one perfect piece of fruit I could afford? Just for you? Have some good selch and eat. My mother sighs and tries to swallow the globe, which spins 60 quick times around the sun, finding her with her grandson and me. All of us considering a bowl of conical, identical supermarket hachiyas, freckled by California, where she lives these days. And this story she tells us. And Adam with his niet. Thanks, but no thanks, Grandma, for that strange fruit. And my mom, who decides to reveal then the DNA of our family's eating. A pogrom, she said, chewed up her uncle, a violinist, as he ran to shelter. The world chomped on a branch of our family like a deer, just needing to eat, just minding its own business. For instance, a 6-year-old boy. Had he not died, he'd be an older brother to my mother. She was not born yet, the first child to sprout in that great mishpacha after the war. They all gave me treats, she smiles sadly, going a bit hungry themselves. I ask what a treat was back then. A handful of sugar? How godlike that persimmon, I think to myself. My mother's grandpa must have imagined he gave her the chance to be just this once the eater. How instead he gave her an order, force-feeding the love of forced feeding, the unsubtle art of forcing, that I spoon-feed to Adam with a dash of Russian, which passes for some vitamin R, to make a child feel rooted. How there may still be a persimmon here. Couldn't my great-grandfather want his only grandkid to know pleasure? He could wish for her to dive into a surprising place. Neither the unwatered earth nor memory's ruinous hug, but softness. And now I'm very happy to introduce Jeffrey Levine, poet, translator, and artistic director and publisher of Tupelo Press. He has garnered 21 Pushcart nominations. His most recent book is At the Kinnegad Home for the Bewildered.
Thank you, Olga. Two confessions. The first, that I seem to be the only one, absolutely the only one who didn't get the memo that we will be introducing each other. So I apologize deeply. I don't know who's next, and so I can't introduce you. And I will go to confession first thing in the morning and confess that. The second confession is that we moved from the warm embrace of Silver Spring, Maryland, to the only anti-Semitic community in all of Long Island, New York, when I was 8 years old in 58. And so I became rather filled with existential doubt. So these are poems of existential doubt. And Jean, here is your tongs again. So this one is called Stealing the Fundamental Tongs. Memory is useless. Even God, who forgot until sunset of the 6th day to fashion the first set of tongs, without which nothing, thus completing the work of creation, then forgot where he put them. The first poem was a tool then, and the second, loss. We forget this, we forget everything. We forget that we are the subjects of mysteries, descendants of known or unknown dates, frail seeds of memory lifted and carried up to our prenatal heads. We forget it's the sensual, super-incarnated pressure that makes us do what we do, eyes closed, lips closed, the oath, the alliance with the ancestral desire. We play the defenseless child, but in truth, we are the demon, the goat, the man on the pyre, the orphan's revolt, the widow's warrior. We have drunk, we have eaten, we have changed species. We walk in such darkness, and we will never know if we are the child, the father, the grandfather, the dwarf, the conqueror. The hero is not what we think. And those we love most in the world, and for whom we paid at the entrance to the path in a single stroke our whole life, and in cash, we cannot even say with conviction why. Memory is useless, sight is useless. We pay cash for the seer who turns out to be second sight impaired, without rights. We pick some flowers and the seer bounds out of the forest, throws us to the ground, and demolishes our engine with his ancient tongs. He strikes our spokes, our handlebars, our fenders, the bell, our trumpet, steals our memory, curses our trumpet, takes our flowers, feeds them to the live coals. And thank you. One more called Why Not Nothing. My Nana, wife of Poppy, told how she and he held hands, squeezed hands in the cattle car. He was my Adam, she says, my good heart, my Patroclus. And when they called out for doctors, he said, I am, and she a nurse, though he a pattern cutter, she a baker of challah and honey cake. So why not pray to be spared from the nothing of nothingness? And so they were delivered. And why not nothing? Well, first of all, gift horse leaps to mind. Even as those few chosen to work entered the town built on the marshes, even if real nothingness would forbid that. It merely encodes what it means for nothing whatever to exist. You want proof? Then know me by my proof. Consider once again the orchestra struck up, the people chosen to work, the chosen, the elect, after the officer had stalked down the ranks in his fur-collared greatcoat, making impatient gestures, pointing at people, pointing at him. They entered together the town built on the marshes, dark water, rusty, black, smelling of decay, filthy shreds of rags, blood-stained clothes, discarded by the camp operating theaters. Yet sometimes a child's song, key to something that is not, surely not, nothing, as after Patroclus is speared. Remember how the first tribute comes from Zeus himself, he who has just engineered Patroclus' death, and now sings of him gentle and strong. Then faithful friend, croons Athena, his warmth of heart, Nestor's son, Antilochus hums. And our best man, irreparable loss and grief, incapacitated by grief, all of them. How is it, O monsters of cruelty, encoders of nothingness, turners away from the nothing that is, escapees, my Nana, my Poppy, singing lullabies to their gift horses, those Appaloosas of the here and now, dappled with the dew of the living.
Well, I will introduce myself. I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Jeffrey.
No, Merrill, I'll introduce you.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, I'll take the blame for Jeffrey since I was the last person of record for talking to him. And it's a pleasure to introduce you, Merrill, such a dear friend. So Merrill Leffler's most recent book of poetry is Mark the Music. The publisher of Dryad Press, he was Tacoma Park, Maryland's Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2018.
So I'm going to read 3 short poems. The first is called A Short History. Listen, you hear the music in the earth that makes us run, of birth and death, and in between the little violences lifting their scarred hands in one poor truce after another. And what follows on from that is a poem called Farewell, which is a stanzaic poem. In these faces, it is always farewell. You may see yourself there or not. You may walk a straight line to hell and arrive through the front door or knock within without thinking at the back. You may be schooled in caution like a spy and count every step and still backtrack into the arms of the enemy. You may crawl on your knees for 100 years and engrave a yellow star on your breast. You may try and cover your fears and pretend you have come to a rest. Dear friends, we are traveling this way alone. Finally, there are no lies. Minute by minute, day by day, each life is a blessing, each blessing a disguise. And the third and last poem is a poem by the Hebrew poet Eitan, that Moshe Dor and I worked on translating. In fact, we did a large selection of poems that West Coast magazine Shurim published. So this is called The Wind Grinds. The wind grinds bones to dust in the country courtyard of death, grinds clouds, vehicles in a low continuous burning, grinds soldiers, grinds cannon and guns, grinds buildings, grinds animals, grinds you and me. Listen, leave your explosives, your vehicles, your soldiers, leave your animals, your wars, your people. They all left you long ago. You have the wind with you. You have the burning light, the land and the dew with you. You have the whole pulverized earth with you. Set your face towards begetting. Set your face once more towards rising. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Aviya Kushner. Am I pronouncing that right, Aviya? Okay. She is the author of The Grammar of Gods from Spiegel and Grau, and coming in June from Horizon Books, Wolf, Lamb, and Bomb, or just Wolf, Lamb, Bomb.
Thank you, Merrill, for that beautiful reading. It's such an honor to read with all of these fantastic poets. I think like many of us, I've been thinking a lot about anger and justice. And when I think about anger and justice, I think about Isaiah. So I'm going to read a few short poems that all in some way engage with the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah. For years, I wanted to be that angry and for it to be that beautiful. I loved the poetry of rage. And now all I can remember are the hills. I can hear the fire in them, words shaking earth. Even a bull knows its owner, an ass its master. Hear heavens, give ear, O earth. And I also think that a lot of us have been thinking about collapse. This next poem is about collapse. Shards. Babylon has fallen, and all her idols have collapsed in delicate detail, in precise shards. So says the messenger, so he reports, but I want to know about those shards, the little pieces, the clay survivors of destruction, broken and sinning and once colorful. Tell me, once split, once shamed, what did they do next? Isaiah, you don't say, and the commentators, my old friends, the squabbling men of medieval desks, of Aramaic-speaking classrooms, you don't care either. You want to know about the messenger. You're busy imagining Habakkuk and Koresh or the angel of God. You want to know whether fallen, said twice, means Babylon is doomed to fall again. We all are, all doomed, all poised to fall. But I want the details. I want the identities of the little shards, their exact addresses and conditions. I want to visit what was once a god and became pottery, became shard. Reading Isaiah as my grandfather's granddaughter. God will have mercy on Jacob despite it all, so there's hope for us humans, something soothing in the offing. After all, Isaiah says Babylon's destruction will mean salvation for Jacob. Tell me, Isaiah, does redemption always mean destruction of another? Is that what you mean? Just hope as hard as you can that you are Jacob? Or maybe it just seems that way to me, the grandchild who should not have been, whose great-grandparents died so fast in the snow on the border between lands and destinies, the girl whose grandfather escaped on the last boat at the last minute, in the last breaths before the Mediterranean became red, before shame forever polluted the blue water. And the last poem I'm going to read is about one of my great pleasures, which is rereading. And if you're looking for something to reread, I recommend Isaiah. Rereading chapter 11. Something is about to dry up the tongue of the Egyptian sea, just seconds after it looked like the wolf and the lamb were about to lounge together. And that's what frightens me, that God or whoever can just dry it all up, take it all away, which is what happened to the brother of the builder of my parents' house, who had his tongue cut out of his mouth at Auschwitz, which sent him into a life without sound, a sentence of being misunderstood. I think of the tongueless man every year on Yom Kippur, the holiest of the holy days, and what makes me tremble are the words, Lord, open my lips and let my mouth utter your praises. Humble it's supposed to sound, and I know I need to ask for that opening of the lips. And then I remember the lines before that, man has the inner workings of the heart, and God owns the tongue. But I want the tongue. That's all I want, to have one body part that is mine alone, to say, God, take it all, control the land, rule over me all my life, but don't take that. No, no, don't cut my tongue out, not that. And now it is my absolute honor to introduce Ed Hirsch. Ed Hirsch has published 10 books of poetry, most recently Stranger by Night. His new prose book, 100 Poems to Break Your Heart, will be published in the spring from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. He is the president of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation.
Thank you. Glad to be with you, everybody. I'm going to read 2 poems. This is a one-sentence history of my family. It's called A Small Tribe. The legend of a small tribe who crossed the steppes to become Eastern European eyeglass grinders with weak eyesight, horse traders, deserters from the Russian army, peddlers, practical merchants, men who cried at the sad stories of women in tenements, who made their mothers laugh over steaming cups of coffee at the kitchen table, social democrats who argued with anarchists and communists, Zionists who never traveled to Zion, failed businessmen who snuck into Carnegie Hall to hear Rubinstein playing Chopin, and then stood on a soapbox in Union Square shouting for justice in the Spanish Civil War, who loved used bookstores in the musty back stacks of old libraries, but started a drugstore in Rochester, or sat on his suitcase waiting for the train to misfortune, selling shirts on Maxwell Street, asthmatics, non-assimilators, whose daughters married developers who never developed, scrap metal dealers looking for an honest advantage, a gambler who beat the house and lost everything 3 times, a box salesman who could not contain himself, a scribbler. My favorite was a daydreamer who bought a new hat every year for Passover so that he could stand outside the temple, which he refused to enter, though he loved the songs and wanted to be close to the prayers. This is called Don't Write Elegies. Don't write elegies anymore. Let someone else stumble past the mausoleum and grieve under the calm shade of a plane tree, wiping away the tears of his ex-wife, staining the knees of his black suit, first sobbing, then choking back sobs, comforting others, consoling himself by scrubbing the white stone and weeding the plot year after year. I'm sorry, it's too sad. It's time for someone else to mourn my dead. Though who else can do it? I just need to lie here a while longer, face down in the soil, and then get up and breathe. I'm very glad to introduce my old friend Barbara Goldberg, who's published 6 books of poems. She translates from the Hebrew and is series editor of WordWorks International. Her selections include translations from ancient Greek, Kurdish, French, Spanish, and Turkish. Greetings to Barbara.
Greetings to everyone, and thank you, Ed. We went to high school together, remember?
I do.
This poem is called Produit du Terroir, which is really produce of the territory, fresh produce. This is not another travel poem, though I could go on about the bluffs, massive in their verticality, or the rivers snaking through the gorge, dark and green as the devil's throat. How the women are bony and thin-lipped, their men more accustomed to judging than being judged. But no, this is of the dreams we have when we are far from home, 7 days now, and feeling foreign to ourselves. In yours, we're armed with skillet and Swiss Army knife, outnumbered by a band of 2-bit thugs. For me, it's Grand Central Station and there's a war on, tanks and bombs, and me running one shoe on, one shoe off. Wherever we go, terror follows, its yellow eyes piercing sleep, and stalks us by day. At the market, local sausage and cheese called Produit du Terroir. Terror has always been with us, in the garden, with its chaos of rocks, the sun turning its face, water rising, blood of dogs, starvation, cholera, nights when we were cold and alone, when trains ran on the dot. Sorry. This poem is called Conservator. Handling the uniforms doesn't bother me. What grates is no sense of urgency, the standing around. Well, the smaller ones got to me at first. They still do, because they were worn by children. Sometimes I treat one that's made a little different, a little nicer, maybe an inside pocket because of a bribe, or a little extra food, or triangular inserts sewn in the pants of former prisoners who marched in annual parades and over the years put on weight. There are those with shoulder pads from later, for musicians in the orchestra, invited often after the war to perform. The same blue and gray coarse material, but tailored like a suit. What bothers me is no one knowing anything about the period. If I hadn't haggled with the gypsies, it would have been no one. We spoke the same language, had the same nose for forgery. Fabric rubbed with coffee grounds, the tannin stains passed off as dirt, the color of the stars all wrong. It's not so bad to work down here in the basement with white noise leaking out from the machine room, low humidity, and lamps that make it seem it's always daylight, the sun always shining. Of course, I'd prefer preserving beauty, but this pays better, and I still get to use my craft. I'm going to introduce, where did it go? Terry Cross Davis, Ellen Turner. Coming.
You have
Terry
it?
Ellen Cross, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Terry Ellen Cross Davis is the author of A More Perfect Union, the Journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize, and Haint, Ohioana Poetry Award, Ohioana Poetry Award. Go, Terry.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you so much, Luther, Nancy, and to Dorrit. I'm honored to be reading in this company and in this community. I'll be reading 2 poems from my upcoming collection, A More Perfect Union. This first one is The Goddess of Scars, and I wanted to read this to speak to the resiliency that we need. Sidney Katz said that we're living through a horror show, but we will get through it. The Goddess of Scars. I mark you with melanin, a crosshatch of collagen. Better the scar than the loss of limb. Better the clean line, raised itch, festering wound, beckoning death. My apostles, my keloids, my atropic, my contractures, my hypertrophic response. Each a love I bear to the mammal of you, the ruptured vessel, the broken endermis. Consider my evolution a song to survival. Consider cells my priest, their work a ladder of prayer, each stitch an epistle. I grieve to see you separate from yourself. My atonement is a bridge to build you back together. While you can never be born again, you can recover. Each time I sign you, witness the parable of action and consequence. I do not think you show enough reverence. You were never meant to be a smooth canvas, but a texture, a testament. I bless you with a story, and each and every time you live to tell the tale. And the second poem is called Knucklehead, and I read this because Black Lives Matter. And in this poem, you'll hear the ages of 3 people, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and Eric Garner. Knucklehead. My son's head is a fist rapping against the door of the world. For now, it's dressers, kitchen islands, dining room tables that coax us clumsy, creating small molehills of hurt breaching the surface. The ice pack, a cold kiss to lessen the blow, equals a frigid intrusion. A boy cannot be a boy with all this mothering getting in the way. Sometimes the floor plays accomplice, snagging an ankle, elbow, top lip to swell. Other times it's a tantrum when he spills his limbs onto the hardwood, frenzied, then limp with anger, tongue clotted with frustration, a splay of 2-year-old emotion voiced in one winding wail. My son cannot continue this path. Black boys can't lose control at 12, 18, even 43. They don't get do-overs. So I let him flail about now, let him run headfirst into the wall, learn how unyielding perceptions can be. Bear the bruising now before he grows, enters a world too eager to spill his blood, too blind to how red it is. It's my pleasure to introduce Ellen Aronofsky-Cole. She is a poet, actress, and teaching artist. Her books include Notes from the Dry Country with Mayapple Press and Prognosis with Finishing Line Press.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you, Dorrit and Luther and Nancy. I'm going to read 2 poems. The first one is a ghazal, which is a form that has a repeating word that you'll hear again and again. And it's a little lighter, but still deals with a form of cultural anti-Semitism, I think, that a lot of us are familiar with. What the nose knows. Where's Ellen? Shouted Cody from the back of the bus. I know. He bounced around on his seat. She's hiding behind her nose. I pretended to sleep on the bus, pressed my face against the window. 2 dots of mist formed under my nose. In drama class, I asked Sean why I'm never cast as the romantic lead. It may be your face, he said. It's comic. Who knows? I joined Weight Watchers and lost 20 pounds. But when I looked in the mirror, everything was my nose. What if you're Ophelia inside, but make your reputation playing sassy maids, or the nurse powdering Juliet's nose? Waiting at auditions, I made a memoji. I chose the curvy body, curly hair. Kara asked, "Don't they have a Roman nose?" After 2 beers, my buddy Lee said, "I used to think you were shallow, the way you obsessed about your nose." I couldn't forgive him, but didn't let him know. "Actresses," I said. I chewed the inside of my cheek and tapped my nose. And to give you some emotional bends, the second poem is about cancer. Many Ashkenazi Jews are more at risk for cancer than the general population. So this seems appropriate. I lost both my parents to cancer, so your sight. My father's hair never turns gray. The back grows bald, and his forehead nibbles his hairline away. I wonder if he has rubbed it off, lying all those days in the ICU. His thoughts bubble out of control. His brain goes incandescent with fantasy. How graciously he greets me. He thinks he's lounging at the American Embassy in Vilnius. The next day, he announces he's leaving and pulls off his tubes. He stands up and falls on his head. Blood leaks in his brain, and the bubble goes dark. Mother lives 2 more years, almost to the day. She eats alone, dines on cottage cheese and prunes, mislays her hearing aid. Her neighbor invites her to the symphony, but she can't hear the melody. Lung cancer reels her in, delivers her to the hospice wing. Her heart rebels, refuses to stop. Radiation fails to diminish her hair. Her chest tightens, her breath slows. Silver waves fall over her shoulder and soften her hospital gown. I finger comb her curls. Now for the end of our program, we're going to hear short poems from our 3 organizers. And first up is Dorrit.
Thank you. This is called Erev Kaddish. The lips of the nearly dead sink in as if they will leap past the teeth, throw themselves down the well of the mouth. The veins of the nearly dead stand up on the backs of their hands, tectonic like ridges, pushed up by the plates of life and death, struggling past each other. The feet of the almost dead are restless, circling 7 times this groom with whom they are betrothed but not yet acquainted. The bones of the almost dead reach up through stretched skin for our fingers, our hair, our wrists, the ropes. We do not throw them. And our next reader, I believe, is Nancy.
Thanks, Dorrit, and thanks everyone for hanging in there till the end. Such an honor to read amongst you. I don't know if any of you have felt that you're getting more religious with time, but I know for me, that's what motivated this poem. We weren't so Jewish then. Dangling our faith on a golden chain, we gave our children Old Testament names like Matthew and Aaron and Ruth to honor the family dead who kept piling up faster each year. A whirlwind of covered mirrors, black ribbons, and yahrzeit candles burning in glass, and words like bracha and yisker at graveside prayer, layering stone upon stone like ancient tropes. But still we wedded outside the tribe, drawn to men who'd never donned a skull cap, yet stomped on glass, timid shards in their souls, to prove their accepting love. Our mothers defied, turned away, and closed their eyes each Shabbat, gathering candlelight in their hands, a vigil to combat the dark they feared we brought upon ourselves, more dreadful than any epithet sprayed on our walls. And Luther, take it away.
Thank you. On the day, if they should come for us, on the day the book is opened, what shall be left to say on the day the book is sealed? Each book that is written is also a gate. The gate opens, the gate closes, and what lies in between are the words, and nothing more is left to be said, except that the gate never really closes and the book is never really sealed. And if they should come for us, this is what must be said. If they should come for us, even so, let us not stop saying it. Thank you to each of our poets. Such an honor to be among you all. And thank you, each one of you, for continuing to say what must be said. And although they have gone on to do other things to help improve the world, I want to express our appreciation to our keynotes, Representative Jamie Raskin and Council Member Sidney Katz. Thanks again to our sponsors, the Writers Center, DC Area Literary Translators Network, and to the Adat Shalom Reconstructionist Congregation. And I want to highlight their office staff who aren't in the room, but who are Rena Milchberg, Sarah Herman, and Marcy Wilson for hosting this event. And very special thanks to our two ushers, our Zoom Gabayim, Myrna Seidman and Hannah Weisberger. I also want to express my appreciation to Dorit, whose idea this was, and to Nancy for lining up actually all of our readers. And thanks to each of you for listening. Have a good evening. Have a good month as we all move toward some sort of festival of light or other. Good night. I'm going to unmute and
Thank you so much.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
special.
That was great.
Lovely.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone, for such a fabulous evening of poems.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
So beautiful. So beautiful. What a wonderful program. Ah, heartfelt. Thank you. Just beautiful. Wow. Terrific show. Just terrific. You guys did it absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
It was beautiful.
Nancy, thank you so much for all your work on this.
Thank you, Aviya, for being part of it.
This is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Luther. Thank you, Dorit. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting and setting this up. This has made the holiday season perfect, just perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and being here.
Hi, Alta.
Hi, Alta.
Anyways.
Chicago is here.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know. It's like
house double.
Seriously. Yeah. Hi, Kate. It's great to see everyone also, you know? Yeah. Kate, I really love the first poem that you read. Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. What wonderful poems. And thank you, Dora and Luther and Nancy. A lot of work to put this together. And everybody at Adat Shalom, thank you all.